Okay, are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Me?
Okay,
You.
so here you go. You're gonna be on the internet. What is your favorite thing about being stepbrothers?
We play Xbox together.
Having to deal with these two when they get all squirrely.
Oh, okay.
Okay. JJ, what's your favorite thing?
Same thing as him.
Oh,
As Will or me? 'Cause that was a pretty indirect point.
Why me?
Yeah.
All right.
You must
Bye,
have-
guys.
Oh, go ahead, say bye, guys.
Bye.
Adios.
Hi, Stephanie and Andy here. It's week 4 of our little adventure in the blended family experience. We wanted to start by sending a great big thanks out to all the kind words and support we've gotten so far. It's been really great to get everybody's feedback, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been awesome. So we're kind of just going to pick it up a little bit where we kind of left it off in both our stories last time, where we met in the parking lot at Jewel. And so the courtship began. And I think just a standard kind of courtship, bouncing back and forth between different houses. And I think for me, like probably one of the pivotal points in our relationship was when I met Laura.
Right, yeah.
And tell me a little, like, what, how important was that to you? Because I think that's a real important thing.
Right. I had kind of been holding off for a little bit because I had made that mistake where the kids had met guys that I was dating and didn't work out. And luckily they're old enough that I can kind of openly talk to them about it. But I really didn't want to do that again. So funny enough, I kind of did. It was pretty quickly in our relationship, but I'm big on openings. I feel like that the world or the universe or the divine is talking to me, even in sometimes twisted little ways. But Laura was having a really hard time with the finalization of the divorce, her dad getting remarried and not being a part of that, and some other things that were kind of going on that she was really having a hard time wrapping her head around. And there was one day she was really upset about it, and she's not a child that gets upset easily. And so I knew she's very creative. She was into trying to create stop motion videos with her stuffed animals at the time. And so knowing Andy's background, I called him up and asked if it would be okay if she came to see what he did at work, because he is a video producer. So I was a little cautious about it, a little hesitant about it at first, but I just knew that she would enjoy that, and I felt like that was going to be a good transition into meeting one of the children. So we met up with Andy at his workplace, and he just kind of showed her the ropes a little bit, editing and some video things, and we went out to dinner.
Yeah. And I got to meet Laura, and it was great. She's fantastic. Like, we like the same kind of music, and it was just really awesome. So that was easy,
Mm-hmm.
And I think from there we just started to take off in our relationship more. We saw each other a lot more often, and the boys came over to your house. I think that was like the first time that they met you,
Right.
and Parker and Laura.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And things were good. Yeah, so things moved along pretty quickly. And I think Stephanie remembers the first time that I said I love you to her, and
I did. It was super romantic. It happened at a bar in Chicago.
Yeah, it was.
And then he's like, "Wait, what did I say?" So
I was a little like,
Yeah.
And we can talk about love later and what probably at the time that I thought love was, but it's definitely evolved. But shortly after that, we were sitting around at my house at the time, and I asked Stephanie to move in with me. And I think you weren't like cold to the response.
No, I think and I was in an uncertain place at that point too. I wasn't sure what I was doing we were dating exclusively at the time, but I
Mhm.
still wasn't sure if I wanted to stick around here at that point. And I think a part of you was a little bit afraid of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was worried she's gonna run away. that's
So his answer was asking me to move in with.
yeah, absolutely. So that's I think at that point, then that's really where our relationship kind of accelerated into overdrive. 'Cause
Right.
we didn't really know when that was going to happen, but I think at one point we just decided that it was after the kids were. It was a good time, actually.
After the school year was
Yeah.
over, because Laura was going to be going into high school and then Parker was going to be transitioning into middle school anyway. So it was a perfect transitional point in our lives to make that move. It would have been anyway, but I knew that if we waited until the school year was over, that it would make it a lot smoother for everyone involved.
Yeah. And at that point, things are good. But then, and then things got interesting, right?
Right,
Because
yeah.
then now we're introducing and becoming more involved in each other's lives. And we're hanging out at our kids' functions. And we're meeting our exes,
Yeah, our former spouses.
our former spouses.
So the stakes have just gone up.
Yeah, and I was still in the midst of a divorce at the time.
That was the other thing about moving in. We knew that once that point had rolled around, then that would all be done too.
Yeah, and that was a trying time. I think that
Yeah.
was difficult for you to see my true life or whatever, because when we're first courting, we always put our best foot forward, and sometimes those cracks don't show up till later on, and those started to show up.
Yeah, I got a good look at all the baggage. It was all unpacked at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah, all the baggage was there, absolutely, and I was still in the midst of dealing with that too.
Right.
And so I think there are a lot of moments in that time before you moved in where it was like you gave me space and let me work through it. During the limbo period, as I'm kind of calling it, we're calling it,
Right.
between when I first asked you to move in and when you moved in, what kind of things were going through your head? And,
What was I getting myself into?
yeah.
That's what was going through my head. What was I getting myself into? I mean, yeah, it was scary for a lot of reasons. It was scary. I got a real sense of what you were coming out of in your first marriage, because I get to experience that first person. It was very intimidating. It was highly intimidating, and wanting to know if that was really something I wanted to get involved in, because I knew that dynamic that you had coming off of that relationship, it was going to be a pressing point for a long time coming. So it was scary.
Yeah, and plus, we're talking about you moving out of a space in a home that you've been in for how
Yeah.
many years, and then for me, making space in my previous marriage home, and everything in the baggage in this house. So that was,
There were rooms, the room we're in right now, we had to completely do over and kind of exhume the demons, because
Yeah.
there were too many bad memories in the rooms for you. So we had to
Yeah.
go through, and there are spaces like you wouldn't sit in here because of what
yeah,
your memories held for you here.
yeah, this room holds a lot of weight to it to me. But it's different because this is totally about renewal now, and that's what's so fantastic about sitting here having this conversation right now. So we can transition now into the moving in, and so that was this summer. Kids are out of school. At that point, I was divorced, and we're doing this. We're
Right.
jumping in, and I think this is when the reality of our relationship starts to
Right.
kinda kick in, and for me, I fall into old patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I really haven't done enough work yet at this point.
The place I was coming from at that point, a lot of my fear had evolved into this like really strong independence, and for better or worse, because I had gotten to the point going through what I'd gone through in my first marriage, that if somebody wasn't going to hold up their end of the deal, then I was going to take care of things, and I wasn't going to wait around for somebody else to take care of stuff. So I think when things would get tough and I would look at you and say, what are you going to do about that? You knew I meant, if you don't take care of this, I will. And that wasn't always the best response, but that's where I had come from in what I'd been through.
Yeah. So yeah, we're both kind of our own styles at this point. I think I think I'm just completely broken, I'll be honest, at that point. And I was looking for anything and grasping at whatever, and that's kind of where I was at. And also I think the challenge becomes, even though we weren't married yet, it's like, how do we parent our kids? And,
Right.
and like, what does that start to look like?
Especially because I had been at home for a while, and that was one of those things that I took on. I wrote about that, especially with Laura. I was home, and I was able to focus on the kids and make sure that everything was going the way I needed it to go for them. And that was the agreement we made coming into this, is that I would be at home still, because you needed somebody here to help with the boys as well. So it was mutually beneficial. And so there was the trying to establish what that would look like in terms of me being here and being a stepmother figure, even though we weren't married yet at the time. But where does my responsibility lie with the boys compared to with my own children?
Yeah.
And then vice versa, when you're home, what's that look like for you with my kids?
Yeah, and I think we struggled through it at times. I think anytime the conflict came in is always around discipline. I think that's pretty much a given. Like, where do you take that? And it wasn't necessarily in front of the kids. I think it was more a conversation together.
Yeah.
It was like,
it was a
okay,
bedroom conversation.
Yeah.
Totally.
So how do we discipline them? Or it's, Stephanie told me lots of times, you better take care of that now. and it was just something I knew I needed to do. And honestly too, like I really grew into my own as a father, going through the things that I went through and having to take care of the boys for a good part of that year.
Right. You've been the primary caregiver.
So I've been the primary caregiver during that time, and so that was good. So it was easier for me to step in. You know, it was hard. I'll just put it this way: it's hard because I was learning how to be nurturing, and then at the same time, be that stern parenting figure. I mean, because we all know that it's important to have both. Kids need to know that they're loved, right?
Right.
And then they need to know where there's a boundary, where things you can't go, or where there's a hard line.
Yeah.
So it's hard to bounce between the two.
Right. And I think the difficult part too is you have such a different relationship with your first wife than I do with my first husband. So the parenting dynamic in terms of how like I can parent and discipline Lauren Parker and deal with that, and then I can have a conversation with their father and we can have a back and forth, and you don't need to really get involved in it as much. You just you know what happens under our roof, and if anything needs to be monitored or held up in a certain way. You don't have that as much. You don't have that open communication as much. So it really makes you look at everything a little bit at a bigger picture, and just kind of, it makes you take a step back. You have to be a lot more patient and take a step back, working together, I think.
Yeah. Because totally different styles. I think the other challenge too was just you moving in here for me, like opening up space, and we talk about like pronouns. It's like catching myself saying my house.
Right. Yeah.
And getting
Those
rid
are
of that.
hard,
And,
because that would sting. You try not to let it sting, but it would sting because I had given up my home to come here and then to feel displaced. I mean, you feel displaced as it is, but when someone says my house, or you bring your kids in and you're trying to make it feel like home, it's super important that you start to embrace it as our home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to this day, every now and then I'll say something, but I catch myself because that's just the way it is, and that's part of that growth. All right, so we've moved in, we're living together, and I think I was afraid to commit further at one point.
And rightfully so.
And so I think there is a point where you're like, all right,
Yeah.
what's next? Let's you're ready.
Yeah.
And I'm not so ready because I've been through a lot. I'm like, oh man. And then in my head you see things that are like pop up, oh, is that? Is that?
Red flag.
Is this a red flag? Is this a red flag? And that's where I was at. And I think, I'm a guy who likes to commit, so I'm a guy who likes to jump in and just be like, yeah. At one point, I was just ready to jump in and see what's next. So I remember we went ring shopping. I think we found a ring, and when we got home, I proposed.
Right, yeah.
It
You
was
were
really-
like, can I give it to you now or can I hold on to it? It was really not coy.
Yeah, it was just kind of I think what's fun is like the good part about a second marriage is like you kind of throw out the fantasy out of the equation.
Right,
It's
yeah.
like this is about facts. Like I love you, you love me. Let's take this to the next level. I don't need to skywrite something in the air, although I think you might like that. Maybe one of these days I will, but so
No, the only thing I need you to skywrite is you were right all along.
pretty much, right? That's the truth. So, this point in our life, I like to say commitment, because not only am I committing to you, I think my biggest commitment was committing to myself. I started to do a lot of work. I saw a therapist, still seeing one, which is a good thing, absolutely. Keep doing that work. And went to Al-Anon, read a lot, started to get in that and started to clear stuff out and really like get that, all the baggage that's just there, and like catching myself. And
Right, because a lot of those red flags were all baggage. It was all based on baggage. Well, there's a point where red flags are helpful.
yeah,
And you should listen to them, but so much of it was coming from a damaged place that anything was a trigger. You were so far into it that all the tiniest little things were trigger moments for you.
I'm starting to work on myself. Were there any, red flags that you had? Like you were talking about red flags for me,
Right.
which is just my baggage. Were there
Well,
any-
your projection of baggage onto things I would do. There were things that I would do, or just even phrases I would use that would trigger something that you'd heard in the past. And it would, even if it was a meaningful thing and I was trying to communicate with you, you couldn't hear it because your mind immediately went to that place. So that was a big thing we had to work through early on. As far as red flags for me coming into the relationship with you and living together and making all those commitments, I really think that it's just the situation you were coming from, because you've always been very upfront. So I didn't have to worry about honesty issues. A lot of what I was coming in with was trust issue baggage things. So I didn't have any trust issues, but the red flags were definitely in the situation you were coming from, because I'd been experiencing that from February, which is when I first met your first wife. From February on, I got to be
part of
on the receiving end of some of that stuff. So that was intense. I had never been around anyone who had suffered from alcoholism at that level before. So that was new, and learning what that looks like, and starting to create space there, because that whole situation needed its own sense of space. But I also did not want to be on the receiving end of that.
Yeah.
So that was probably the biggest red flag, and we had to learn how to incorporate what that looked like in our relationship, because that was a relationship, and it still is a relationship that you have to be able to foster for the benefit of your boys.
Mm-hmm.
But there needs to be some level of distance in terms of where the rest of us fall in that, because that's where we can't be collateral damage in that.
Yeah.
So that was probably understanding that if you were going to be strong enough to pull through that for everybody, because it wasn't just about me and you at that point, or you and the boys, or you and your first marriage. It was about all of us, and that's a heavy burden to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing you were working on yourself, was it fair of me to expect all of that from you?
Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I think part of our relationship is the insights that you have, and the way that you talk sometimes is the way I want to be talked to, and I think was always like, I don't know, my saving grace of like our relationship, thinking about our relationship. So very honest woman. Yeah.
Some people don't like it.
Yeah, some people don't. So I think we're gonna kind of move on and just kind of talk about our marriage. You know, I think we, what was it? A year after you moved in here,
Yeah,
we decided to keep it simple on our getting married, and it was so actually.
It was great.
This has been fantastic because we were so on the same page about this. Like, so we planned to get married, go on a road trip.
Right. Yeah, we planned a family vacation, a 2-week road trip out west, and we were going to go through Colorado and some national parks and really hike and sightsee.
Yeah.
And what's out west? Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that we easily incorporated into our 2-week road trip, and it was great.
Yeah, we got married by Elvis. Pretty awesome.
The kids had no idea who Elvis was, but they had a blast.
Yeah.
It was fun. They had a really good time. We all had a great time, and I was really impressed with how well the kids did for the 2 weeks,
Absolutely.
let alone at our wedding. But it was a wonderful, wonderful trip, and it was kind of keep it simple, stupid. That's really what it came down to.
It was great, and I think that's the first time that we all really bonded as a family, and that was fantastic. It was really, really good. And so within marriage, though, comes a whole other group of family and stuff that starts to get integrated into this mess. And I think that anyone who's married, anyone who's been married multiple times will start to understand, what does this look like now that we're married now? Who do we talk to? Who do we answer to? Who's all involved?
What do holidays look like? All of those things.
Yeah, so.
And it's hard enough with your first marriage. I remember with my first husband, and I'm sure anybody can identify with this who has a family, is where do you go for Christmas? Do you go to your husband's family's house for Christmas? Do you go to your family's house for Christmas? Do you just do Christmas at your own house? Or do you spread Christmas out to a week-long holiday session where you're bouncing around? So now, when we plan anything, it's not just Andy and myself that are planning. I come with Laura and Parker. Andy comes with Will and JJ. Andy, Will, and JJ have Will and JJ's mom on the other side. I have Laura and Parker's dad on the other side. Both of our first spouses are also remarried.
Yeah.
So they are remarried to their spouses are also divorced, so that's their spouse's second marriage,
Yeah.
and they have spouses on the other end of their things. So we're not only managing our own schedule within our family unit. If we want to plan something or if we need to coordinate schedules, we have set schedules in our court orders, but if we want to coordinate anything that's sketchy outside of that or vacations come up, we have to make sure we can coordinate it with our exes, who also have to coordinate it with their current spouses, who have to make sure it works out with their exes.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with something like 5 families to make
Yeah.
one family function work. And that doesn't even include Andy has a mom and dad. I have a mom and dad. We both have siblings.
Yeah.
They need to know kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
And it
Our
all
families.
turns into a hot mess at some point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like throwing a match on gasoline.
Yeah, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think, honestly, though, just keep it simple
Yeah, it's
and not too complicated. Follow the agreed times in your JPA, and I think that's kind of what's awesome about it in a way is it's like, okay, well, here, you just look back and here's what you're supposed to follow. And also, I think
boundaries.
And just making, you know, if you don't want to go to a family function,
Or you can't
Or
go to family function, you know.
Yeah, or yeah,
Because your kids have something, you know, we separately, our children do their own things.
Yeah.
So you have to be reasonable within yourself. The only people in a blended family you truly have to answer to are each other as spouses
Yeah.
and your children. So if it is making you nutty,
yeah,
stop, take a deep breath, and think, who do I need to be most accountable to at this moment in time?
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a saving grace, and absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better myself. That's a lot of people. So, and that's great because boundaries and space, and that kind of brings us right to the and where we're at right now. You know, I think, you know, the key things that I'm picking up on just being in a blended family and getting remarried and all that is first and foremost individual work. Do the work,
Yeah.
clear the baggage, right? Clear your baggage and work on yourself.
Right.
If,
Don't live there.
if you just, there's no choice.
Yeah.
If you want to be happy, you got to look within,
Right.
period. There's no question. And it's all starts there because nothing else can really happen at that
No.
point.
Right.
Because what'll happen is the
You'll-
same issues will
yeah.
come up again and again. Those red flags that you hear or you think about with me, like if that I think about with you, are just they're just your
Projections.
projection, your
Projections,
past
yeah.
baggage, because you're a different person,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to turn that other person into the other person that you
The first
couldn't
person
stand,
you were married
you can't
to.
stand. So, and honestly, this is good. This is good advice for anybody.
Any relationship.
Any relationship, you know,
Friendships,
long, yeah.
working relationships,
I had-
anything.
Yeah, my therapist is he's like a marital counselor too, and he talks about the second marriage within the first marriage, so that we all need to go to a second marriage. Hopefully, you can stay in your first marriage and grow
Into that.
into that second marriage, or you get divorced and you go into a second marriage. You don't want to have a first marriage and the second marriage, right?
Right. No. Ideally, you want to have your first marriage become your second marriage. But
Yeah, into those years, and I think I'm sure everyone can identify with that who's been
Right.
married for
25.
10,
Yeah.
15, 20 years.
Yeah.
You could understand that. And then, so you're working on yourself. I think what's most important, you know, in our relationship is, you know, the space between us.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that a
Yeah.
little more. We'll write about that. But something that I've been adamant about is our space, and this is kind of what when I talked about what's most important when you have all these external obligations coming at you. Our space is sacred and our space is exclusive, and on our website we have some resources, and one of them is the Zimzum of Love, I think.
Rob Bell,
Yeah, Rob and
Rob and
Kristen
Kristen.
Bell. And I had said, I had told Andy time and time again, our space is exclusive. This is our space. This is our space. And we read that book, and that was one of the phrases. They talk about 4 spaces, and that was one of them that came up. And it's so absolutely true. You really have to keep what's between you and your husband a sacred space. You need to hold space for yourself, and you need to hold space for them, and that needs to be the most important thing outside of your children that you nurture.
Yeah, together. And again, you can't create that sacred space. I'm going to bring it back to the individual, but you can't create that without the work on
Right.
yourself. And I think what's great about that space and then the work outside for ourselves is then we can create a nice, they've got the psychological aspect, but then comes in the spiritual aspect. And that's really where I think things start to grow. And we're in our infancy, so I'm not an authority on
Right.
talking about any of this stuff. But I just know I could, once you feel it and you can hear it, it's fantastic, and it's a great, it's a bigger picture thing.
Right, and it starts to open up the line of communication
Yeah.
between the two of you too, I think.
So then, that's where you develop a language where you can talk to each other and feel safe and loved, and it's fantastic.
Right.
It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's
Lord knows you need it when you're in
Yeah.
a blended family.
yeah. So I think we're good for today. We talked
Yeah.
a lot. Hopefully you guys have all not fallen asleep by now, but this is some good information. We're starting to get into the meat
Right.
of what it means to be in a blended family. You've heard our stories. Now you're hearing about where we're at
Yeah.
and the challenges that we're dealing with. And Stephanie's going to write another blog this weekend, and it's going to be fantastic. Some of the ideas she's got bouncing around in her head are pretty awesome. So, well, come on, you're a good writer. And so, thank you for watching,
Thank
you make sure you like our page and
On
keep on
Facebook, yeah.
Facebook and keep up on this. Have questions.
Mm-hmm.
Throw it out at us. I mean, we've got some
Yeah.
resources, and
Yeah,
we're
feel free to
developing.
leave questions on our Facebook page, and I think maybe
Yeah.
we'll add a contact section on our website too that you can contact us through.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
See you in
See
a
ya.
week.
Bye.